One single tank. 3 minutes of absolute chaos. Against a force outnumbering them 10 to 1, the impossible happened. This is the story of a tactic that defied every military manual ever written. The date is December 1944. The air is freezing, and the fog is thick. The Allied line is stretched to the point of total collapse by a German offensive. In T-sector victory wasn't just unlikely, it was considered a mathematical impossibility. On paper, this was a suicide mission for the Americans. The German Tigers had 100 millimeters of armor and the deadly 88 millimeters gun. The American Shermans were faster, but their shells usually bounced off like pebbles. Meet our protagonist, a commander known for unorthodox thinking. He wasn't a West Point grad. He was a mechanic before the draft caught him. He saw tanks as machines to be hacked, not just symbols of power. The terrain was a nightmare of slush and narrow, icy mountain paths. Conventional wisdom said tanks couldn't maneuver effectively in these conditions, but our commander noticed a technical flaw that the German experts had missed. He realized that the heavier the tank, the slower its turret could turn. If he could get close enough, the Tiger's greatest strength became its weakness, but getting close meant driving straight into the mouth of the dragon. The stakes were higher than just a single skirmish in the woods. If this pass fell, the entire division would be flanked and decimated. Every military analyst predicted a total American collapse within 48 hours. It is now 8 o'clock hours on the morning of the main engagement. The crew checks their ammunition, knowing it might be their last inventory. The silence in the valley is about to be shattered by the sound of steel. What happened next would completely rewrite the book on armored warfare. The method used was so strange, his own driver thought he'd lost his mind. It's a tactic still analyzed at the Army War College to this very day. In exactly 14 minutes, this commander will face 3 Tigers alone. The moment he figures out the secret admin at 6:15 is absolutely brilliant. Stick around, because you've never seen a victory quite as insane as this. The engagement begins with a sudden, deafening crack of thunder. The first German shell misses the lead Sherman by less than 3 feet. Action front. The commander screams over the crackling radio net. Instead of retreating to the ridge, the commander gives a shocking order. "Full throttle!" "We're charging them," he commands, defying all safety protocols. The crew stares at him, frozen for a second before the engine roars. He isn't charging in a straight line, which would be certain death. He's using a slalom method, moving at a speed the manual says is impossible. The tank bounces violently, the crew struggling to stay in their seats. Target at 12 o'clock. The gunner yells, hands shaking on the controls. The Tiger's massive barrel begins to turn, a slow, predatory movement. It's a race between American speed and German heavy engineering. The commander doesn't fire yet, even though he has a clear shot. He knows a frontal hit will do nothing but alert the enemy to their spot. He's waiting for the sweet spot. A narrow window of tactical opportunity. Notice what happens next. The Sherman begins a wide, high-speed arc. By maintaining 25 miles per hour, they outpace the Tiger's turret rotation. The German crew can't keep the nimble American tank in their sights. Then comes the first part of the unusual tactic. The blind man's bluff. He orders the deployment of smoke, but not for simple concealment. He's using the smoke to trick the German gunner into aiming at a ghost. Las 8:15 hours. The first contact. The first Tiger fires into the smoke. Thinking they caught the Sherman, the shell whistle screams through the air, hitting nothing but a frozen tree. The American tank is already 300 yards to the flank. Now, the commander bellows, and the 75 millimeters gun finally barks. The shell strikes the Tiger's side sprocket. A low probability, high reward shot. The massive German machine grinds to a halt, its track unspooling in the mud. One down, but 2 more Tigers have just crested the frozen hill. But here's what nobody knew at the time. Our commander was just warming up. The next 60 seconds would change the fate of the entire division. The interior of the Sherman is a furnace of noise and oily fumes. "Driver, hard right. Get us into that ravine," the commander orders. He's intentionally leading the 2 remaining Tigers into a narrow choke point. The ravine is barely wide enough for 1 tank, let alone 3. The German commanders, overconfident in their armor, follow him inside. This is the classic mistake of the hunter becoming the prey. Our commander is using the reverse slope tactic in a brand new way. He knows that tigers can't depress their guns far enough to hit him below the rim. He's baiting them into a physical impossibility of geometry. The German tanks struggle with their weight on the slippery ground. One tiger begins to slide, its massive tracks clawing uselessly at the ice. The technical disadvantage of the invincible tiger is finally being exposed. Imagine you're in that cockpit, looking through a narrow vision slit. You can see the enemy, but your gun physically cannot point low enough to kill. This was the impossible challenge, turned completely on its head. We are now at the 5-minute mark of this high-stakes engagement. The second tiger manages to stabilize, but it's blocked by its sliding comrade. The commander sees his open-ear move so risky it's almost suicidal. He orders the driver to ram the lead tiger's side directly, not to destroy it, but to use the collision to pivot his own tank. The sound of screeching metal is heard for miles across the valley. The collision works. The Sherman spins like a top on the icy surface. Now, the American gun is pointed directly at the Tiger's engine cooling vents. This is the most vulnerable point on the entire German machine. Point-blank range. There is absolutely no missing this shot. The shell penetrates the engine, and a massive pillar of fire erupts. That's 2 down. Only the final boss tank remains. But the third Tiger is commanded by a battle-hardened veteran. He hasn't fallen for the trap, and he's currently zeroing in on our hero. Wait until you see what happens next. Move that made military history. The final Tiger is 500 yards away, with a clear line of sight. The Sherman is currently pinned against the side of the ravine. Unable to move. The German gunner takes a slow breath, his finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, the commander throws a phosphorus flare behind his own hole. The blinding white light and intense smoke create a massive foul Z. To the German gunner, the Sherman now looks twice as big as it actually is. It's a trick of light and shadow, called the ghost profile. The German gunner fires at the center of the smoke mass, missing the hole. The shell sails through the white cloud, missing the real tank by inches. Now, before he reloads, the commander bellows over the intercom. The Sherman bursts through the phosphorus cloud like a demon from hell. They are now less than 100 yards from the final shock tiger. The German loader is frantically trying to shove another 88mm shell in, but the American loader is faster, fled by pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Ready, he screams, slamming the breech shut with a metallic ring. The commander orders a drive-by shot, a tactic used by cavalry. They don't stop. They don't aim. They fire while moving at top speed. It's a Hail Mary pass in the final seconds of the ultimate game. The shell hits the turret ring, the narrow gap below the turret. The impact doesn't penetrate, but it welds the turret in place instantly. The Tiger is now a 50-ton paperweight that can only fire in one direction. Like a shark circling a wounded whale, the Sherman finds the weak spot. 3 shots are fired in rapid succession into the Tiger's thin side armor. The final German tank is silenced, its crew surrendering as they climb out. Las 8:35 hours, victory secured. 3 Tigers destroyed. 1 Sherman still standing and operational. The impossible challenge had been met and conquered in under 30 minutes. This wasn't just a lucky win. It was a total tactical revolution. The expert analysts were proven wrong, and the manual was now obsolete. But here's why this victory matters even more today than it did in 1944. Word of the engagement spread through the division like a wildfire. The commander was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions, but he didn't care about the medal. He cared about the tactical lesson. He spent the next week teaching every other crew in the regiment his method. Don't fight the tank, he told them. Fight the man inside the machine. He focused on human limitations, not just the thickness of the enemy's armor. Before this, American crews were told to engage Tigers from 2,000 yards. He proved that engaging at 200 yards was actually safer if you moved fast. It was a psychological shift that saved hundreds of lives in the weeks to follow. With his new confidence, the armored divisions began to push harder. The Tiger terror that had plagued the infantry began to finally fade away. If 1 Sherman could take 3 Tigers, the war was effectively decided. The army even began modifying tanks based on his specific feedback. Better turret stabilization and faster traverse speeds became the new priority. The era of heavy tank dominance was starting to reach its historic end. Our commander survived the war and returned to his life as a mechanic. He rarely spoke about that morning in the freezing Arden forest. To him, it was just a problem that needed a mechanical, logical solution. But the Arden sweep is still studied by modern tank commanders today. The principles of asymmetric engagement remain at the core of NATO doctrine. Notice what happens when you combine speed with an understanding of physics. Even with digital targeting, the concept of turret lag is a factor. The same impossible tactic is programmed into modern battle simulations. History doesn't repeat, but the laws of motion and psychology certainly do. We honor the men who had the courage to think outside the box, because when the odds are impossible, it's the unusual tactic that wins. It's a reminder that no machine, no matter how big, is truly invincible. Think that was the only time a weaker tank won the day? Wait until you see what happened in the Golan Heights. Years later, but first, let's look at the secret documents that prove this wasn't a fluke. For years, some claimed the Three Tigers story was an exaggeration. But in 1995, declassified after-action reports confirmed every single detail. The witness statements from the German survivors were the final proof. One German commander wrote, "We felt like we were fighting a phantom. Every time we aligned our sights, the target moved to an impossible spot." This confirms that the commander's ghost profile tactic worked perfectly. Looking at this 3D model, you can see the genius of his positioning. He used the dead ground of the ravine to hide 80% of his tank's profile. The Germans were effectively shooting at a moving coin at high speed. General Patton himself reportedly reviewed the case personally. His only comment was, "I want 10 more men with that much damn sense." High praise from a man who had little patience for anything but results. His Sherman, nicknamed the Mechanic, was eventually recovered and restored. You can still see the deep gouges in the side armor from the collision. Those scars are the physical record of a tactical miracle in the snow. Thousands of visitors walk past these machines every single year. Most see them as relics of a bygone, simpler era of warfare. But to a tactician, they are the remains of a masterclass in survival. Today, we call these types of maneuvers force multipliers. The idea that a single unit can do the work of 10 through strategy. It's why the US military spends more on training than on the hardware. His family didn't know the full story until the late decade. He was just dad, his son said in a recent emotional interview. A hero who didn't feel like a hero. Just a man who solved a problem. The trees have grown back, and the ravine is now covered in moss. The sounds of war have been replaced by the quiet songs of birds, but the ghost of the Mechanic still haunts these historic hills. In exactly 5 minutes, we're going to reveal the lost interview tapes. The commander's final words on the battle will change your view of courage. Stig Vitas. Because the most shocking part is still to come. We managed to locate a 1950s interview with the commander. His voice is calm, gravelly, and completely devoid of any ego. "I wasn't brave," he says. "I was just too busy to be scared." He credited his entire crew for the victory, not his own brain. "If the driver hadn't hit that turn, we were dead meat," he recalled. This level of humility is common among the greatest tactical minds. Modern theorists scold what he did getting inside the enemy pseudo-loop. He was making decisions faster than the German commander could process them. By the time the Germans reacted, the Sherman was already on its next move. Imagine the sensory overload inside that tank during the charge. The smell of hot oil, the taste of dust, and the vibration in your teeth. Maintaining tactical clarity in that environment is a superpower. Interestingly, the German commander he defeated became a friend later. They met in the 1960s to discuss the battle over a map and coffee. The German admitted he thought he was facing an entire American platoon. This false projection is the ultimate goal of any commander, making the enemy believe you are stronger than you actually are. It turns a physical battle into a psychological one that you've already won. While Germany focused on Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons, America focused on reliability, speed, and the training of its men. This battle was the ultimate proof that quality of mind beats quality of armor. Many of our commander's peers didn't make it home from the Ardennes. He carried that weight with him for the rest of his long life. Every tactical innovation he shared was an attempt to save more boys. Legend says the tank still sits somewhere in a private collection. Others say it was scrapped and turned into a bridge in rural France. Whatever it is, its legacy is etched into the history of warfare. What if the commander had followed the manual and retreated? The entire Ardennes offensive might have turned out very differently. Next, we explore the butterfly effect of this single 30-minute fight. We've seen the battle, the tactic, and the immediate aftermath. But there is one detail we haven't told you, the secret of the Minucci says. Ikinzi. Here is the exact moment the commander changed everything. At exactly 6:15 into the fight, the Sherman was almost out of ammo. The gunner reported they had only 3 smoke shells and 1 AP left. Most commanders would have surrendered or fled at this exact moment. But our commander saw a discarded piece of irrigation pipe on the ground. He realized it looked exactly like the barrel of a 76mm long gun. He ordered his crew to lash it to the turret with some spare wire. This was the decoy tactic that had the Germans second-guessing. They thought they were facing a much more powerful Sherman Firefly. This caused the Tiger crews to hesitate, giving the Americans the edge. That hesitation was the only reason the Sherman survived the first charge. In a world of life and death, 3 seconds of hesitation is an eternity. He hacked the enemy's visual identification system with a piece of trash. It was a bluff, the commander later admitted with a smirk. I played them like a game of poker, and they folded their hand. This is the impossible part of the victory that experts still debate. It's a reminder that resourcefulness is the ultimate force multiplier. When you have nothing left, you use your imagination as a weapon. The tactical innovation wasn't just a move, it was a mindset. Today, militaries use inflatable tanks and heat signature decoys, but our commander did it first with a wire and a piece of scrap metal. He was a pioneer of visual deception on the fly. The citation mentions his extraordinary heroism and resourcefulness, but it doesn't mention the pipe that remained a crew secret for years. Only the men in that tank knew how close they really came to death. They survived the day, and they survived the winter of '44. They became the most famous ghost crew in the entire Third Army, and they did it by breaking every single rule in the training manual. We're entering the final act, the aftermath and the modern legacy. Why is this story being shared more now than it was 50 years ago? The answer lies in a discovery made at the battlefield site in 2018. In 2080, a team of historians found the wreckage of the third Tiger. They discovered something that changed the narrative of the battle again. The German tank wasn't just hit, it was hit in a mathematically perfect spot. The shell had struck the only 2-inch weakness in the entire turret. The odds of hitting that spot while moving at 20 miles per hour are 1 in a million. It wasn't just a tactic, it was the most legendary shot in World War II history. Modern ballistics experts can't even replicate it in a lab. It has become known as the mechanic's luck. But it was more than luck. It was the result of a man who knew his machine's limits perfectly. Here's why this matters today. We are relying more on AI and tech, but this battle proves that the human element is the deciding factor. An AI would have calculated a 0% chance of victory and retreated. We must never forget that warfare is a human endeavor. No matter how many sensors we have, we need unorthodox thinkers. We need people who see a ravine not as a trap, but as an opportunity. His legacy lives on in his family and in the soldiers he inspired. They remember a man who was quiet, humble, and incredibly sharp. A man who did the impossible because he didn't know it couldn't be done. Whether it's on a battlefield or in a boardroom, the lesson holds. Speed, positioning, and the courage to use an unusual tactic. These are the keys to victory against any set of impossible odds. Next time you face a challenge that seems too big to handle, think of the commander and his Sherming in the freezing fog. Think of the mechanic and his irrigation pipe gun. Because victory isn't about having the biggest gun, it's about having the best plan and the heart to see it through. That is the true story of the tank commander's impossible victory. But wait, there's one more unusual victory you haven't heard. The story of the ghost army that tricked Hitler with inflatable tanks. If you enjoyed this tactical breakdown, you're going to love what's next. To understand why this victory was so shocking, look at the numbers. The US built nearly 50,000 Shermans during the course of the war. Germany only managed to produce about 1,350 of the legendary Tigers. Every Tiger lost was a catastrophic blow to the German war machine. Our commander didn't just win a battle, he destroyed irreplaceable assets. He was a resource-leveling force on a global scale. The Sherman was designed to be fixed with a wrench and a hammer. Our commander's background as a mechanic made him the perfect pilot. He understood the soul of the machine better than any officer. He reportedly spent his nights tuning the engine for extra torque. He knew that in the mud of the Ardennes, torque was more important than speed. Small mechanical adjustments can lead to massive tactical advantages. This is what we now call user-end optimization. Taking a standard piece of equipment and making it better for the task. The commander was a hacker before the term even existed. Even in the middle of a world war, they found ways to stay human. They carried a small terrier named Wrench in the hull with them. The dog reportedly slept through the entire Three Tiger engagement. The specific village they defended has a memorial today. The locals still tell the story of the Sherman that wouldn't die. It has become a piece of local folklore, passed down through generations. Communication was the hidden tactic that won the day. The American radios were clearer and more reliable than the German ones. Our commander could talk to his driver and gunner instantly, without lag. Keep moving. Keep talking. Keep fighting, he wrote in his log. A simple philosophy that carried him through the darkest days of 1944. It's a mantra that still applies to any high-pressure situation today. We are closing in on the final assessment of this historic event. But first, we have to look at the counter-tactic the Germans tried. What happens when an unstoppable force finally meets a clever object? After the battle, the Germans tried to adapt to these tactics. They ordered their crews to never engage Shermans at close range. But by then, the Americans had already moved on to the next innovation. This is the cat-and-mouse game of military history. Every impossible victory leads to a new set of rules for the next war. Our commander was just one step ahead in a very long race. If you ever find yourself outgunned and outnumbered, remember, tease, the size of the opponent doesn't matter as much as the size of the plan. Innovation is the only thing that can truly level the playing field. This concludes our deep dive into the tank commander's victory. A story of grit, grease, and a very unusual way of winning a war. He proved that impossible is just a word used by people who give up. If you want more stories of tactical genius, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be covering the greatest innovations in history every week. Don't miss our next episode on the Siege of Bastogne. Coming soon. Check out our other video on impossible sea victories right here. The principles of the commander apply to the water just as much as the land. Go ahead. Click it. You won't believe how they saved that destroyer. One last look at the man who did what the experts said was impossible. He lived to be 94. And he never once considered himself a legend. But to us, and to history, he will always be the mechanic of the Ardennes. We dedicate this video to all the crews who fought in those steel cans. Their sacrifice and their brilliance secured the world we live in today. May we always remember their stories and their unusual victories. The engine is turning off, but the lessons are just beginning. Stay sharp, stay unorthodox, and we'll see you in the next mission. This is signing off from the battlefield. Still here. Good. Because next week, we're talking about the one tank that took on an entire city. Subscribe now, or you'll miss the most impossible story yet.